So I'm Tom Strange, and I'm curator here at Sigal Music Museum. And I want to talk to you just a little bit about this digitization program that we have with our early instruments and where it came from and why I think it's important.
My name is Alex Davis, and I own a company called Tempest Instruments. And at Tempest, we create virtual instruments, which involves recording them and creating software around it so that you make a playable instrument that someone could sit down and experience it.
So we began to cast about for the idea of how we might be able to digitize these. And fortunately, one of our associates who became a staff member here, Chris Stack, knew of an individual, Alex Davis, working in Asheville, North Carolina. And Alex had a little company that did exactly that.
I also co-founded a company called Embertone, and as part of Embertone, we created virtual string instruments, including violins and cellos, and had an awesome collaboration with Joshua Bell. And we were able to sample him on his priceless Stradivarius and recorded over 20,000 samples in 2 days to create a virtual violin.
So when we think about curating an instrument, we talk about its history, its the stories that go with it, who made it, when it was made, what were the historical context of when it was made, and then when we get to the instrument itself, the measurements, the photographs, a way of characterizing exactly what you have in front of you. The one thing that we've never really been able to do before, though, was to capture the sound of the instrument in something beyond simply a recording of a piece by an artist.
One of the challenges creating these harpsichords and proto-pianos in a virtual environment is to consider the environment we recorded them in. One of the concerns at the beginning was that we've never recorded instruments like this on site. So we had many test sessions before we actually did it to make sure that the acoustics were right and that we could hone in and get the sound that we were looking for. And luckily, using the right combination of microphones, we were able to get a great sound.
In this particular case, we have digitized the 1761 Jacob Kirkman marquetry harpsichord, the one that was the wedding present from King George III to his new bride Charlotte when she came to London to marry George. So a very important sort of instrument, certainly the sort of instrument that somebody would like to hear themselves, maybe even be able to play themselves. Because of the historic nature of these instruments and the fact that every time they're played, there's a little bit of wear and tear, it makes it difficult for us to just turn students loose and say, yes, come play all the instruments as much as you want.
One of the interesting components of this is every instrument is just a little bit different. So there are lots of different variations. Some of these instruments don't have pedals. One of them has a knee pedal, which is something I've never encountered before. So thinking of it in terms of software, each instrument has some interesting variations that makes it a big challenge to create code around all this stuff.
And this is very, very valuable because now not only do you know everything about the instrument in terms of what could fit into a file cabinet, but you have a digital record of the kind of sound it makes. And now anyone, anywhere in the world with an electronic keyboard like this and a simple setup can bring forward that particular sound and start playing and hearing that sound again. This is a way of capturing the instrument, distributing it to the world in such a way that people can learn more about it, perhaps before they even come to Sigal Music Museum.
From the beginning, when we made this instrument, I wanted it to feel like an educational experience. So it's not just about being able to get your hands on the instrument, but also I wanted there to be a learning component of it. So when you're curious, I want each instrument to have a little information button. And you can click on that and get some more background and learn about the history. The user interface for this instrument is like no other that I've made before. I created a 3D environment, a nice 3D room, and I took hundreds of pictures of each of these instruments to create 3D models of them as well. Once those instruments were placed in the 3D space, I could move the camera around and be able to get a sense of what these instruments look like. So in the interface, I wanted it to feel like you're in an actual space and you're browsing the instruments, almost like you're walking around.
And so we began to think, how can we do this? We knew that historically people have sampled early instruments before. They've done digitizations from those samples. One of the problems in the past has always been that the samples were fairly small. We were limited by the technology that would allow how many samples could be taken, whether you could do each and every note or you had to interpolate between notes. And so the end result was sort of a caricature of the instrument rather than actually understanding what the sound of the instrument was. Recently, of course, memory has become cheap, processing power has become tremendous, and now we can actually truly characterize each and every note, sometimes with respect to the early pianos, at the various velocities that the hammer would actually strike the note, or the various changes that the instrument might have, like the mute or the bassoon, or other interesting characteristics that you could add in to make the piano as it was at the time. I think it makes the experience of actually seeing the real instrument that much stronger because you have some familiarity with what it was like. And unlike the attempts in the past, which, as I said, were more like caricatures of the instrument, this is more like a real photograph of the instrument. You're actually able to make the sounds that it makes. Nothing quite replaces wood and wire when you're hearing a true instrument performed live. Certainly, as the signals have to travel through a speaker and come back to you, they're going to be altered a little bit. That's all right. Just like a photograph is not the same thing as actually seeing it, these samples aren't going to be exactly the same thing as hearing it, but they get you so much closer that it allows you to say, I now know something that I didn't know before. So I've been very, very enthusiastic about this program, and we have actually sampled quite a number of our keyboards, and this is something that will be ongoing. So I'm looking forward to the next wave of samplings, and possibly by and by bringing in sampling of the woodwinds and other curious instruments that we have at Sigal that need to be seen and heard by the world a little bit better.
Hi, my name's David Sims, and I'm the Executive Director here at Sigal Music Museum, where we are absolutely thrilled to have our new digital sample library sponsored by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, Tempest Instruments, the Metropolitan Arts Council, and Native Instruments. This grant, our first ever federal grant, will allow us to put a digital workstation just like this one in 10 different Greenville County schools, a program that we hope we can expand on in the future. Thanks to our sponsorship from Native Instruments, each recipient gets a full suite of contact software, which has thousands of other digital instruments besides our own. The first 10 schools to receive this program were chosen for their proven commitment to music education. And in the future, we hope to expand this to many, many more schools. Not only for large music programs, but also for those schools who need a spark for their growing music education programs. Each school will also receive recording software, which will allow their students to record all kinds of projects on their own. Part of our grant with the IMLS includes a measurable at the end of the school year, which will end up giving us a collection of all kinds of great recordings from these schools, played on our instruments. We hope that this program and future programs will allow Sigal Music Museum to stay connected to as many schools as possible in the Greenville County School District, and then hopefully after that, to expand to a much larger network of educational institutions.